Well, hello there. It's Magic Prepper, and I wanted to have a little conversation with you about something that should be in every prepper's inventory, specifically related to firearms. Now, I have a lot of videos out about different types of firearms that you should definitely have in the sense of preparedness, and a lot of those videos have focused on handguns specifically, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. And I've got videos about the Glock 45, the SIG P320, I've got videos about 1911s, and I have a video about the P365 XL, which is actually what you see right here, which has a very modular system and gives you access to a lot of different options when it comes to having a firearm, especially if you're only going to have one, right? However, there was something that I wanted to address that I didn't touch base on in those videos as well as maybe I should have. And I wanted to let everyone know that I have not necessarily lost my mind, even though I am pretty sure I'm currently in my evil villain arc. Welcome to my lair. So, here's something that I want to make sure everybody's very aware of. And if you're not aware of this already, then you've probably been living in a cave under a rock, or you just don't have experience with this type of department of prepping, which is the firearms department. But that's fine because that's what I'm here for. Everyone should have a Glock 19 in their inventory. Now, does it have to be the only handgun you own? Of course not. Should it be the only gun you own? Well, it definitely can be, but it is something you should have, regardless of personal preference and everything else related to handguns. Everybody should have at least one Glock 19. And I don't mean clones. I don't mean PSA daggers. I don't mean Shadow Systems MR920s. I don't mean anything related to ZEV Technologies or Salient Arms. I'm talking about specifically a factory Glock 19. Gen 3, Gen 5, whatever your flavor is, those are the two I would probably look into if you're going to get a Glock 19 from the factory. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. And honestly, this is my Glock 19 Gen 5 right here, which I am currently carrying. So, here's the thing. With the Glock 19, you get a lot of versatility in the sense of being able to carry it, in the sense of being able to use it as like a duty style weapon, and in the sense of it being a reliable firearm, aka a Glock. But the other thing you get with it is tons of aftermarket support and the logistics of owning a Glock. And that really can't be overlooked when it comes to an SHTF scenario. Regardless of how you feel about Glocks, I understand that you don't like the ergonomics. I understand that you don't like how they look. I understand all of the shortcomings of the Glock, especially the fact that they still ship with awful polymer sights. But they are still the GOAT when it comes to the logistics supply chain. Parts are cheaper, magazines are cheaper, finding holsters is a cinch. You can get a holster from any manufacturer with any light combination you can possibly think of. You'll find it, no problem. Brand new holsters that just came out, like my Safari Volt I recently received, that is only available for Glock right now. It will be available for other firearms soon, but Glock comes first. Everything related to Glock is easier to acquire and generally less expensive. So even though a factory Glock might run you $600 from the factory, let's just say it's an MOS model, right? So you can mount optics on it. Well, yeah, that's going to be twice as much and almost 3 times as much as maybe a PSA dagger. But PSA daggers don't work with all of the Glock accessories, specifically holsters. So you buy yourself into an environment that allows you to have access to affordable products, affordable logistics supplies regarding parts, regarding everything else that you want to support a handgun platform. You have the durability, reliability, and the track record of Glock when it comes to working in adverse conditions and when it comes to being able to rely on it to save your life. And then you also have parts compatibility with those who are within your group or in your immediate area. If you were to scavenge North America right now looking for handgun parts, you're more likely to find something related to Glock than just about anything else out there. And even though the SIG P320, with the downfalls that it has, which it has some, whether or not they're realistic or perceived, doesn't matter. It definitely has earned a reputation of sorts. It is adopted by the US military and many law enforcement agencies all over the country. It still has nothing in the logistics supply chain battle compared to Glock when it comes to the affordability of the holsters, the magazines, the parts, everything else. Not to mention, a friend of mine who, you know who you are, recently talked to me about the fact that Glocks are just third world weapons, which means they're easy to work on, they work when they're supposed to, and you don't have to worry about them too much when it comes to maintenance. Now, this all might be redundant to everybody, but for a lot of new people in the preparedness game, they're trying to figure out what exact gun they want right now. And one of the pieces of advice you'll get from a firearms store, right? If you go to the gun store and the guy behind the counter wants to give you some advice about what you might want, Sometimes you'll get the guy who will just tell you we'll get a Glock 19. And honestly, that's just because it's a safe answer. That person won't be disappointed. Yeah, they might not like how it feels as much as other guns. Yeah, they might not like how it looks as much as other guns. But when they go to buy stuff for it, they're going to be glad they bought a Glock because they're going to be able to get the sights, they're going to be able to get the holster, they're going to be able to get the magazines, all for generally cheaper or at least easier to acquire than everything else that's out there. Now, when it comes to Glock 19s, you can get the same level of support that I get from Midway USA, which is the biggest supporter of the channel. So a big thanks to them for always helping me out, especially when it comes to any of the things surrounding additional parts or the logistics that we're talking about here, which makes the Glock 19 such a good idea. So, for example, like this HK VP9 you see right here, which honestly is a pretty enjoyable handgun to shoot, has excellent ergonomics and feels very good in the hands. I actually really like how this feels in my hands. But once I started looking at parts, magazines, and everything else related to putting everything I want on the gun, or at least having it set up in a way that I find to be feasible for the things that I want to accomplish with it, everything became much more expensive very quickly. And I was much more limited on my options when it comes to holster compatibility and when it comes to compatibility in general with many other things you would want regarding your handgun. So, although I like this gun and the ergonomics are great, it's still not a Glock 19. And obviously, I like my SIGs quite a bit. And if you didn't know that, you haven't been watching this channel for very long. But regardless of all that, regardless of my affinity for Sig Sauer products, and regardless for my affinity for just about anything else ergonomically than a Glock, having a factory Glock 19 that you don't toy with, that you don't tinker with, that you don't change every single aspect of it out with in order to make it Guccier, just to find out it doesn't actually work all the time and you get light primer strikes or whatever else might happen. Having a stacked factory Glock 19 Gen 5 or Gen 3 in the safe, and Gen 4 if you want, whatever you want to do, as long as it's a factory Glock, really is a great idea and almost a baseline requirement for anybody who's serious about preparedness, being a Minuteman, and having the ability to defend themselves on their person, like you can do with a Glock 19 versus something like an AR-15, in some type of SHTF scenario. When you walk out that door, during that apocalyptic event that's forcing you to walk out the door, it's really hard to envision grabbing any other handgun besides a Glock 19. And I've owned Glock 17s, Glock 45s, multiple Glock 19s. I've got PSA daggers. I've shot other Glock clones as well. And honestly, when all's said and done and it all comes back around full circle, you end up with a Glock 19 once again. So I thought I would share this with everybody because you probably already know this, but some of you might not. And for those who didn't know this, let me know in the comments below if this might have helped you make some decisions or possibly given you some ideas about what you're considering when it comes to putting together your preparedness inventory based on firearm selection. All in all, the Glock 19 is an excellent platform. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, and I would say you should have one. The same way I think you should have an AR-15. They're basically ubiquitous at this point when it comes to preparedness-related firearms platforms. And as was recently stated by T-Rex Arms, the Glock itself is actually becoming a platform rather than just a brand of pistol. And I do agree with that assessment, especially based on the fact that their Generation 3 patent recently expired, which means lots of manufacturers are putting out Glock clones now that hang around that same environment and use a lot of same parts compatibility, as well as magazines and everything else related to Glock. So that gives you a lot more options and a lot more possibilities when it comes to having those logistics work in your favor post SHTF. But regardless of that, if you want to also benefit from all of the holster designs and everything else that's available out there, then get a factory Glock because it won't let you down. You know you're getting what you paid for when it comes to the exact design parameters that Glock works with, and it will work with all those aftermarket accessories that everybody wants to have. Hopefully this gave you some things to think about. Let me know in the comments below if you like Glock, maybe you hate Glock. I'm not actually like a huge Glock fan. I don't like the way this gun feels in my hand very much. I don't like the way it looks at all. But I will be carrying this Glock 19 for quite some time here into the future because things are getting dire in this world. And I think that the possibility of needing a concealed carry firearm for more than just a mugging type scenario is becoming more and more likely. And if I had to suddenly turn the car around via U-turn in the middle of the highway after a nuclear explosion and couldn't make it back to my home depending on the situation, would I want something like the P365 XL on me at that time? Or would I want something like the Glock 19 Gen 5 on me? And that's the question that I had to answer myself and say, you know what? I think it's time to do something a little bit different here when it comes to EDC. And I think it's time to get back to basics because that's how things are going in our world right now. They're forcing me to get back to basics instead of being some kind of flamboyant hipster. So, wait, am I one of those? That's gonna be it for Magic Prepper.